Episode 1, The First Ring. It was 3:17 in the morning when my phone rang. I remember the number glowing in the darkness of my room, the digits blurred by sleep. But as I rubbed my eyes, my chest tightened. The caller ID was my own. My phone was calling me. I answered with a shaking hand. At first there was only static, a cold hiss like wind passing through broken glass. Then came a voice. My voice. Tomorrow, 6:45 p.m. Crosswalk, Elm Street. That's where it ends. I froze. The line went dead. For a long time I sat in the silence of my bedroom, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself I was still dreaming. Who the hell pranks someone like that? And how could it sound so much like me? Morning came heavy. Coffee tasted like ashes. I told myself it was a glitch, a nightmare sown from insomnia. But the words clung to me like a stain. 6:45, Elm Street. That's where it ends. The day moved like a funeral march. Every sound too sharp, every shadow too long. I checked my phone a dozen times, half expecting another call, half hoping the first had never happened. But the screen stayed quiet, as if waiting. By 5:30 I couldn't resist the pull anymore. Curiosity, fear, fate, whatever it was, it dragged me out of my apartment and into the evening air. My steps carried me toward Elm Street, that ordinary stretch of road with its peeling storefronts and flickering streetlights. At 6:40 I stood at the corner, heart hammering. Traffic hummed around me. People crossed with grocery bags and strollers, all blissfully unaware that I was counting down the seconds to my supposed death. 6:43. I told myself to walk away, to laugh at the absurdity and go home. 6:44. My palms were slick with sweat. The red light glared across the crosswalk like an executioner's stare. Then, 6:45, the light changed. I stepped forward. That's when the car appeared. A black sedan shot around the corner, headlights flaring, tires screaming. It roared toward me with impossible speed. I froze, blinded, breath strangled in my throat. The world slowed. I saw my reflection in the windshield, my eyes wide, mouth open, face twisted in terror. And then, the car swerved. Tires shrieked. Metal screamed. The sedan clipped the pole of the traffic light and spun out, sparks scattering like fireflies. It missed me by inches. I stumbled backward, chest heaving, heart hammering so loud I thought it would burst. People shouted, rushed forward, someone called for help. But all I could hear was the echo of my own voice, still ringing in my skull. 6:45, Elm Street. That's where it ends. It hadn't ended, not yet. That night, when I crawled back into bed, my phone lay silent on the nightstand. But I knew, tomorrow at 3:17 a.m., it would ring again. And this time, maybe I wouldn't be so lucky. Episode 2, Death Replayed. I didn't sleep that night. Every tick of the clock dragged me closer to 3:17 a.m., the moment my nightmare had begun. I sat in the dark, staring at the phone on my nightstand like it was a loaded gun. My hands trembled, not from cold but from the certainty that the silence wouldn't last. And I was right. At exactly 3:17, the phone vibrated. The glow of the screen burned into my eyes. Caller ID, me. I swallowed the scream, clawing up my throat, and answered. Static. Then the voice, my voice again. Calm, measured, heavy with doom. You escaped once, but you can't run forever. Thursday, 7:15 p.m. Oakwood Bridge. That's where it ends. The line died with a click that felt like the snap of a coffin lid. I sat there in the dark, clutching the phone like it was a living thing. My chest rose and fell in shallow gasps. Oakwood Bridge, 2 miles from my apartment. I knew it well, too well. The day crawled by. I couldn't focus at work. Faces blurred, voices drowned in the pounding of my heart. The bridge lingered in my mind like a shadow stretching across every thought. By evening, I tried to convince myself not to go, to ignore it, to stay safe inside. But the truth gnawed at me. Fate doesn't need your permission. It finds you. And so, against reason, I walked. The sky was bruised purple when I reached Oakwood Bridge. Cars rolled past, headlights spilling across the metal rails. The river below whispered in black currents. I gripped the railing, my knuckles white, and waited. 7:13. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of rain. 7:14. A low rumble of thunder, a flash of lightning far off. 7:15. The screech of tires split the night. A truck skidded across the wet asphalt, swerving out of control. Time fractured. Headlights bore down on me like the judgment of heaven itself. I leapt backward as metal crunched against the railing, sparks screaming into the storm. The truck jackknifed, teetered dangerously, then slammed to a halt just feet from where I had been standing. I lay on the pavement, lungs burning, rain splattering against my face. My heartbeat was chaos, but I was alive. Alive again. And then I heard it. A laugh. Not from the driver, not from the bystanders. It came from nowhere and everywhere, curling around me like smoke. My laugh, distorted, echoing. You can't escape. You only delay. I scrambled to my feet, clutching my phone. The screen was black, but I swore I could feel it vibrating in my hand. Alive with something that wasn't supposed to exist. The bridge behind me groaned under the weight of twisted metal. People shouted, sirens wailed in the distance, but all of it blurred as the words pulsed in my skull. I hadn't avoided death, I had only postponed it. And deep inside I knew, tomorrow at 3:17 a.m. the phone would ring again. Episode 3, A Stranger Knows My Name. The night after the bridge I swore I wouldn't pick up. I told myself I'd silence the phone, turn it off, drown it in water if I had to. But when 3:17 a.m. came, the shrill vibration cut through the dark like a blade. My chest tightened, my hand moved on its own, and once again, I answered. This time the voice was different. Still mine, yes, but cracked, hollow, like it had been dragged through a grave. You're being watched. Stop looking for answers. Sunday, 9 o'clock. The corner of 5th and Pine. That's where it ends. Click. Silence. I couldn't breathe. My own voice was warning me, but also daring me to test fate. 5th and Pine was downtown, crowded with late-night bars and neon lights. Why there? Why me? By morning, paranoia gnawed through me like rats in the walls. Every shadow on the street seemed to stretch too long. Every reflection in a window looked a second too delayed. I skipped work. I couldn't pretend to be normal anymore. That evening, against every sane instinct, I went to 5th and Pine. Crowds spilled onto the sidewalks, laughter and drunken shouts painting the night in careless color. I stood rigid at the corner, counting down the minutes. 9 o'clock. Nothing happened. I exhaled, shaky, almost laughing. Maybe it was over. Maybe the calls had lost their grip. And then, Ethan, my name, spoken softly, directly into my ear. I spun around. A man stood just behind me, mid-40s, trench coat damp from drizzle, eyes hollow like windows to a burned-out house. He wasn't holding a phone, but I swear, I could hear the faint hiss of static around him, as though he carried the calls in his pocket. I know what's happening to you, he said. My mouth went dry. What do you mean? The calls, he whispered. The voice, it's yours, isn't it? Predicting your death. The world tilted. He knew. This stranger knew what no one else could. My brother got them too, he said, voice cracking like old wood. He lasted 5 nights. The calls told him when, where, how. He thought he could beat it. He couldn't. I staggered back, heart in my throat. You're lying. The man's eyes filled with tears, but his face stayed stone. The last call he answered was mine, my voice, begging him not to pick up. Thunder rolled across the city, rattling the neon signs above us. Before I could speak, the man grabbed my arm, fingers cold as ice. Listen to me. The voice isn't warning you. It's hurting you. Each call pushes you closer. You think you're surviving, but you're only following the script. Then, just as suddenly, he let go and melted into the crowd, swallowed by umbrellas and cigarette smoke. I stood alone at the corner of 5th and Pine, trembling. For the first time since it began, I realized this wasn't just my nightmare. It was a plague. Episode 4, The Voice Isn't Alone. The night after meeting the stranger, I told myself I wouldn't answer again. But when 3:17 a.m. arrived, I was sitting on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, waiting like an addict waits for the next hit. And when the screen lit up with my number, me calling me, I pressed accept. The static poured through first, that cold hiss that crawled under my skin. Then came the voice, my voice. Tuesday, 11:30 p.m., abandoned rail yard. That's where it ends. But this time, it didn't end there. Behind my own words, I heard something else, a faint, broken sob, a woman crying. At first, I thought it was some trick of interference, but then it grew louder. soft gasps, muffled screams, the sound of someone trapped on the other side of the line. I whispered into the phone, "Who's there?" The crying stopped, and then, in a whisper so fragile I could barely believe it was real, came the words, "Don't listen. Don't follow. Don't let him finish the ledger." The call cut off, leaving me with nothing but my own ragged breathing. I didn't sleep again. The phrase circled my mind like a vulture. The ledger. The stranger had mentioned something about hurting, about being pushed along a script. Could this be what he meant? A ledger of deaths? A list being read aloud? By evening, I found myself at the rail yard. Because of course I did. Curiosity is stronger than fear, and fear is stronger than reason. The place was a graveyard of steel, rusted tracks, broken freight cars, graffiti bleeding across every wall. The air smelled of oil and rain. My footsteps echoed in the emptiness, and each one sounded like it belonged to someone else. 11:29. The phone buzzed in my pocket. Same number, same time. I lifted it to my ear. This time the sobbing came first. Desperate, shaking, a woman's voice gasping between tears. "He writes your name. Every night he writes your name." Then my own voice thundered over hers, sharp and cold. 11:30. You fall beneath the wheels. In the same instant, the silence of the rail yard broke with a screech. A freight train, long abandoned, lurched forward on rusted tracks, metal grinding against metal as if dragged awake by something unseen. I stumbled back, tripping over gravel, barely rolling clear as the massive engine roared past. The air stank of burning iron, though no one had been there to drive it. The train thundered on, sparks spitting into the night, and then vanished into the dark beyond the yard. I lay there trembling, phone still pressed to my ear, listening. The line was open. The sobbing woman's voice whispered one last thing before dissolving into static. "If you hear me, you're already on the ledger." Click. Silence. And for the first time I felt something worse than fear. I felt chosen. Episode 5. The Crossed Wires. I tried to convince myself it wasn't real, that the sobbing woman's voice was a hallucination, a trick of my sleep-deprived mind. But her words clung to me like cobwebs. "If you hear me, you're already on the ledger." I couldn't carry it alone anymore. So the next night, I asked someone else to stay with me. Claire, an old friend who still believed I was just unraveling under stress. She agreed, reluctantly, to sit with me past 3 in the morning. "You need rest," she said, pouring me coffee in the dim light of my kitchen. Not ghost stories. I wanted to believe her. But as the clock ticked closer to 3:17 a.m., my pulse quickened. My skin prickled with that familiar static. And right on time, the phone lit up. My number, my name. Claire rolled her eyes. "Answer it. Prove to me this isn't some prank you're pulling on yourself." With trembling fingers, I pressed accept and held the phone between us. The hiss of static filled the room. Claire frowned. Then came the voice, my voice. "Wednesday, 10 o'clock, outside her apartment. That's where it ends." Claire blinked. That sounded like you." But before I could reply, the sobbing started. The woman's broken cries spilled through the speaker, raw and desperate. Claire's face drained of color. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. She nodded slowly, her hand clamping onto my wrist. "Yes, oh God, yes." The woman's voice cut through, clearer than before. "He's close. He watches when you answer. Don't let him finish the name. Don't." The call snapped off. Silence crashed down around us. Claire's eyes were wide, her lips trembling. "That wasn't you," she whispered. "And it wasn't a prank. Someone's really calling you." But I could see it in her face. This wasn't just someone. This was something. The rest of the night, neither of us spoke much. Every creak of the apartment, every hum of the refrigerator felt alive. Claire left before sunrise, promising to check in later. I could tell she didn't want to be alone with me, or with whatever followed me. That evening, at exactly 10 o'clock, I stood outside her building, shaking. I couldn't keep myself away. The ledger demanded it. The street was quiet, except for the hum of a street lamp and the echo of my footsteps. My phone rang, again. This time I didn't answer. I threw it onto the pavement, screen cracking as it buzzed against the asphalt. But even then, I heard it. The sobbing, the woman's voice, not from the phone this time, but from the shadows themselves. "He knows you're not alone anymore." The bulb above me flickered, and for a fraction of a second, I swore I saw a figure standing just beyond the circle of light. A shape, watching, waiting. and then it was gone. But the words lingered like poison in my ears. He knows you're not alone anymore. Episode 6, Dead Caller ID. By now, sleep was a memory. I lived in a haze of coffee and fear, every thought circling back to that phone, to that voice, to the woman sobbing through the static. But Claire's pale face the night she heard it too, that was the confirmation I'd needed. I wasn't hallucinating, it was real. And if it was real, then maybe I could trace it. So I did something reckless. I took my phone to a friend who worked at a small cell provider, someone who owed me favors. Late at night, under flickering fluorescent lights, he pulled up the records. "You're not gonna like this," he muttered, squinting at the screen. "Every call comes from the same number, same as yours." I leaned closer. "That doesn't make sense." He hesitated. "It's not just that. The SIM associated with that number, it was deactivated 7 years ago. Reported lost." My stomach dropped. "Whose SIM was it?" He looked uneasy, lowering his voice as though the walls themselves might be listening. "Yours." The room spun. My number had been calling me, from a version of itself that should have been buried years ago. I stumbled out into the night with my phone clutched tight, my friend refusing to answer any more questions. Rain slicked the streets, neon reflections trembling in puddles. I couldn't stop replaying it in my head. A dead SIM, a dead line, still calling. At 3:17 a.m., as if to mock me, the phone rang. I answered. Thursday, 9:22 p.m., Riverside Park. That's where it ends. I almost hung up, but then came the sobbing, louder than ever, desperate, almost choking. "Listen," the woman gasped. "He's not just calling you. He's calling through you. You're the conduit. The line has to stay open, or he can't finish the ledger." The voice dissolved into static, replaced by my own again, calm and merciless. "You're getting closer." Click. I stood in the dark, staring at the phone, my reflection warped across the cracked screen. My chest heaved, panic rising. But something else crawled beneath it. Rage. Closer? To what? To who? That evening I went to Riverside Park, as the call had said. The place was deserted, swings creaking in the wind, the river whispering against the banks. At exactly 9:22, my phone lit up again. I didn't pick up, but the street lamps flickered, the air thickened, and from the far side of the park, I saw her. A woman in a torn dress, hair plastered to her face, shoulders shaking with sobs. I froze. She lifted her head. Her eyes met mine across the distance, hollow and glistening with tears. Her lips moved, though no sound carried over the water. And then, my phone, lying heavy in my pocket, repeated the words she mouthed. "You're already dead. You just haven't caught up yet." The call cut. The woman vanished. The park fell silent, and I stood there, clutching a phone that should have been buried 7 years ago, realizing I wasn't just being hunted. I was haunted. Episode 7, Funeral in Advance. I thought I had seen the worst of it. Voices in the static, a phone number that should not exist, a woman sobbing across the dead air. But nothing prepared me for the night I was invited to my own funeral. The call came at the usual time, 3:17 a.m. My number, my voice. Sunday, 2 o'clock. St. Mary's Chapel. "You'll watch yourself go into the ground." I laughed at first, a jagged sound that hurt my throat. But when I checked my phone's calendar, there it was, an event scheduled under my name. Funeral service, 2:00 p.m. I didn't put it there. By the time Sunday came, dread gnawed through every nerve. I told myself not to go, but the pull was too strong. Like a moth circling flame, I couldn't resist. St. Mary's was an old stone chapel, its walls blackened with time. Rain tapped against stained glass windows as I slipped inside. The air smelled of wet roses and candle wax. Rows of mourners sat in silence, their faces hidden in shadow. None of them looked up when I entered. At the front of the chapel stood a coffin draped in white. My chest tightened as I approached, footsteps echoing against the cold stone floor. The priest muttered a prayer, words tumbling together in a language I didn't recognize. He didn't look at me. No one did. I reached the coffin. My hands shook as I pushed the lid open. Inside was me. My own body, pale and waxen, dressed in a black suit I didn't own. My lips were sewn shut with thin silver thread. My eyes, closed, yet twitching beneath the lids as though they dreamed of something far worse than death. I stumbled back, choking on air. This isn't real. It can't be real. And then my phone rang, loud, piercing. The sound filled the chapel. though no one else reacted. The mourners sat still, like mannequins. The priest kept mumbling. I answered with trembling fingers. The sobbing woman's voice broke through, desperate. "Don't look at him. Don't let him see you watching yourself." Who are you talking about?" I hissed. The line crackled, and over her voice came mine again, calm, cruel, final. 2 o'clock. You watch yourself go into the ground. At that exact moment, the body in the coffin opened its eyes. Dead white eyes, my eyes. The sewn lips twisted into a smile. I dropped the phone. It clattered on the stone floor, screen glowing with one final message. You were supposed to stay inside. The lights of the chapel flickered, the mourners dissolving into shadows. The coffin slammed shut with a deafening crack, and the echo rolled through me like thunder. When I stumbled back outside into the rain, the chapel was gone. I stood alone in an empty field, grass wet beneath my shoes. No stone walls, no stained glass, no mourners. Only the echo of a coffin closing still rattled in my skull, and the certainty that the ground beneath me was already waiting. Episode 8. The Woman in the Static. After the funeral that wasn't mine, yet, I couldn't escape her voice. The sobbing woman had threaded herself into my every waking thought. I could hear her in the hiss of air conditioners, in the crackle of old radios, even in the silence between my own breaths. I needed to know who she was. That night, as the clock crawled toward 3:17 a.m., I sat in the dark with my phone pressed flat on the table, daring it to ring. And right on time, the screen lit up with that cursed caller ID, me. I answered. Static surged through the line, louder than usual, filling the room like a storm. My voice came next, cold, flat. Monday, 11:58. Mirror House. That's where it ends. Then, cutting through the static, came her. But this time it wasn't only sobbing. It was words, fractured and trembling. "Help me, please. He's writing your name." But mine was written first. "Who are you?" I whispered. My throat was raw, as though the question itself cost me something. The static thickened, warping into shapes, into sounds that weren't quite human. And then, through the distortion, I saw her. Not in front of me, not in the room, but in the screen of my phone. Her face flickered in the pixels, pale and blurred, eyes wide and drowning in tears. Her hair clung to her cheeks as though she were underwater, mouth quivering with words that didn't align with the sound. I nearly dropped the phone. My reflection was supposed to stare back at me, but she had replaced it. She leaned closer, her face pressing against the inside of the glass. "Don't let him see you watching me." My blood turned to ice. Who is he?" Her lips trembled, forming a single word. The sound came broken, shredded by static, but I felt it more than I heard it. The caller. Before I could speak again, my own voice overpowered hers, slicing through the connection like a knife. "You shouldn't have seen her." The screen went black. I sat there, paralyzed, staring at my reflection now restored on the shattered surface. My heart slammed against my ribs like it wanted out. The room was silent again, too silent, until a ripple crossed the mirror on the opposite wall. I froze. The glass shivered, faintly at first, then violently, as though something behind it was trying to break free. And in the blur of that vibration, I saw her face again, the woman from the static, pressing against the mirror this time, eyes wide, desperate. Her lips moved soundlessly, but I didn't need to hear the words. I knew them already. "Run." The glass cracked. I stumbled backward just as the mirror split down the middle with a shriek, shards spraying across the floor. But when I dared to look again, the reflection was whole, untouched. My phone buzzed once more, a text message this time. From unknown. Now he knows you can see her. Episode 9, Countdown. I used to fear the calls for what they said. Now I feared them for their precision. Before, the voice gave me vague hours, distant places, moments I thought I could bend, avoid, twist away from. But after the woman in the static appeared, everything changed. The calls weren't warnings anymore. They were appointments. The night it began, I was awake at 3:17 a.m., staring at the phone as if it were a snake about to strike. When it rang, my blood felt cold and ancient, like it already knew. I answered. My voice came sharp, like a clock's hand slicing air. Thursday, 11:59 and 27 seconds. South Pier. That's where it ends. The line hummed, not with static, but with ticking. A clock's ticking, relentless, surgical. And underneath it, faint but unmistakable, came the woman's whisper. The closer the second, the deeper, he writes. I didn't sleep, I didn't blink, I just counted the hours until Thursday bled into night. At 11:30 I stood on South Pier. The ocean stretched black beneath a swollen moon, waves clawing against the rotting wood. Every creak of the pier echoed like bones breaking underfoot. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I didn't need to check, I knew the time. 11:58. The ticking started again, faint but pulsing, syncing with the frantic hammer of my heart. 11:59. The wind tore through my jacket, cold and sharp as a knife. 20 seconds. I gripped the rail, nails digging into the splintered wood. 25 seconds. A shadow moved at the far end of the pier, too tall, too still, watching. 26 seconds. The sobbing woman's voice surged through my skull, not through the phone this time, but inside me. Don't let him call your second. 27 seconds. The boards beneath my feet gave way. Wood splintered. I plunged downward, the ocean swallowing me whole. Salt water seared my lungs as I thrashed, the current pulling me deeper into the black. My phone slipped from my grip, glowing faintly as it sank. Through the blur of bubbles and panic, I saw something beneath me. Not the ocean floor, not wreckage. A desk, an old wooden desk, and a figure hunched over it, hand moving across a massive open book. He was writing. And as I drifted downward, I saw the ink smear across the page, my name underlined twice beside a single number, 11:59:27. I kicked, fought, clawed toward the surface. Somehow, impossibly, I broke through, coughing and gasping under the night sky. I clawed onto the remains of the pier, lungs tearing with each ragged breath. I was alive again, but the ticking didn't stop. It echoed inside my skull long after I crawled onto the shore, soaking, shivering, broken. Because now I knew. It wasn't the call that predicted my death. It was the clock. Episode 10, The Betrayal. I thought I was alone in this nightmare. That the calls, the voices, the ledger, they belonged only to me. But I was wrong. The revelation came from Daniel, my oldest friend. We hadn't spoken in weeks, not since I started spiraling, canceling plans, muttering about voices on the phone. He finally showed up at my door one night, eyes ringed with shadows, hands shaking as if he'd lived the same storm. I need to ask you something, he said, voice brittle. Have you been getting calls? The blood in my veins froze. I didn't answer at first, just stared at him, my throat locked. He laughed, a broken, bitter sound. I knew it. I knew I wasn't insane. Slowly I nodded. Daniel leaned closer, whispering like the walls might betray him. Every night, 3:17. Same number, same warning. But it's not just anyone's voice I hear. His lips trembled. It's yours. The words punched the air out of me. Mine? Yes, he hissed. Your voice telling me when, where, how I'll die. The room tilted. My stomach lurched. All this time I had been listening to myself predict my own death, while he had been hearing me predict his. He rubbed his hands through his hair, trembling. Last night, it said, Friday, 6:03 p.m., Hillcrest Tunnel. That's where it ends. He looked up at me, eyes wild. Why would your voice be the one to tell me that? I don't know, I stammered. It isn't me, Daniel, it can't be. You have to believe me. But even as I said it, doubt coiled around my words. What if it was me? What if somewhere in some twisted mirror of reality, I was the one calling him, just as I was being called by another version of myself? The thought gnawed at me. A chain of voices, a chain of deaths. We decided to test it. Against every shred of reason, I agreed to go with him to Hillcrest Tunnel. If fate wanted to script his death, maybe we could rip out the page. The tunnel was a concrete throat carved into the earth, its mouth yawning in the glow of failing street lamps. We stood there at 6:02, breath shallow, silence crushing us. And then my phone rang. Caller ID, Daniel. But when I answered, it wasn't his voice. It was mine. Cold, final. 6:03, inside the tunnel. That's where it ends. I dropped the phone as Daniel staggered back, horror etched across his face. Don't you see? He cried. You're the one calling me. You're the one leading me here. Before I could reply, a roar filled the tunnel. Headlights exploded from the darkness, a truck barreling through far too fast. Daniel froze. I lunged, shoving him hard, both of us tumbling against the rough concrete wall as the truck screamed past, missing by inches. When the echo died, we were still alive. But Daniel's eyes cut into me with something I had never seen before. Not fear, not gratitude. Distrust. Episode 11, The Ledger of Death. After Hillcrest Tunnel, Daniel stopped answering my calls. I couldn't blame him. If I were him, I'd think I was cursed too, maybe even the source of it all. But the silence between us left me stranded in a darker place, alone, hunted, and desperate for answers. That's when the package arrived. No return address, just my name scrawled in black ink across a weathered envelope left outside my door. The paper was damp, as if it had been pulled from the bottom of a river. Inside was a book. Its leather cover was cracked, almost pulsing beneath my fingertips like skin that still remembered blood. Across the spine, carved into the hide itself, were 2 words, The Ledger. I flipped it open with trembling hands. Inside were names, hundreds of them, each carefully written in black ink, followed by a date, a time, and a place. The handwriting shifted from page to page, but every entry ended the same. A line drawn through the name once the time had passed. Each name crossed out like a debt collected. My heart stuttered when I found it. My own name. Ethan Cross. Underlined twice. The date blank, but the time written over and over in the margins. 3:17. The more I turned the pages, the more I realized the truth. This wasn't just mine. The ledger belonged to everyone who had ever answered that call. The sobbing woman's voice echoed in my memory. He's writing your name. And then, a fresh entry caught my eye. Ink still wet, smearing under my thumb. Daniel Hale, Friday, 6:03 p.m., Hillcrest Tunnel. My stomach dropped. The call hadn't lied. Daniel had been next. My push had saved him. Delayed it maybe, but his name was still there. Waiting. A sound snapped my head up. The phone on the table vibrated, screen glowing with that cursed ID. Me. I didn't want to answer, not while holding the ledger, not while staring at my name written in it like a death sentence, but my hand moved anyway. Static filled my ear, followed by my own voice, low and sharp. You found it. Good. Now you understand. The ledger is never wrong. You don't escape it. You only make room for more names. I gritted my teeth. Who are you? The line crackled, and then another voice layered over mine. Deep, ancient, resonant. I am the caller. The keeper of names, the one who turns voices into graves. The connection burned out, leaving my ear buzzing. I looked down at the book, horror rooting me in place. Because on the final page, empty just moments ago, fresh ink bled across the parchment. My name, scrawled again. Beneath it, in jagged strokes, 2 words. Final call. Episode 12. The final call. The ledger sat open on my table like a wound that wouldn't close. My name bled across its final page, beneath the words final call. No date, no place, just inevitability. All day, I waited. Every sound was an omen. The rattle of pipes, the hiss of the wind, the ticking of my own pulse. I told myself not to answer the phone again, that ignoring it might sever the chain. But fear isn't rational. And at 3:17 a.m., when the screen lit up with my number, I answered. This time, the voice wasn't just mine. It was many. A chorus of voices poured through the speaker, layered one over another, hundreds of tones, men and women, old and young, all speaking in unison. The sound pressed against my skull like a tidal wave. You are the last name in the ledger. My throat closed. What do you mean, the last? The voices bent into a single roar, breaking into fragments that clawed at my ears. We were all called. We all answered. We all died. Now the line closes with you. I dropped the phone, but the voices didn't stop. They spilled into the room itself, echoing from the walls, vibrating through the glass in the windows. My lights flickered, the air thick with static. I staggered back, covering my ears, but the words burrowed straight into my mind. Final call. Final call. Final call. The ledger flipped its own pages, slamming against the table. The ink on every line shimmered wet, as though the dead themselves were rewriting their deaths in unison. On the wall, my shadow twisted, stretched, detached itself from me. And in that warped silhouette, I saw the figure hunched over the desk, the one I'd glimpsed beneath the water at the pier. A pen in its skeletal hand. Writing. Always writing. I screamed. Why me? Why my voice? For a heartbeat, silence. Then one voice pushed above the chorus, colder than any I had ever heard. Because every caller must become the call. The room shuddered. My phone vibrated violently across the table. The screen spiderwebbed with cracks. The timer on it flicked down to 0. No hours. No minutes. No seconds, just zero. I lunged for the ledger, desperate to rip my name out, to tear the page free. But the book burned under my hands, the ink searing into my skin. The chorus rose to a deafening howl. Final call. My reflection in the darkened window split. Not one of me anymore. Hundreds. Each of them holding a phone. Each of them speaking in sync with the voices. And as their mouths opened wider, I heard the next line in the script. Tomorrow, 3:17 a.m., someone else will answer. Through you. The lights blew out. The phone went dead in my hand. And in the suffocating silence that followed, I realized the truth. I hadn't survived the calls. I had inherited them. Episode 13. Death Loops. I used to believe death was final, a line drawn once, never crossed again. But now I know better. Death isn't an ending, it's a circle. And I've been running its edge for longer than I can remember. The night after the final call, I woke in my bed at 3:16 a.m., heart racing, phone on the nightstand. The glowing digits of the clock shifted. 3:17. The phone rang. I answered without hesitation, almost numb. But instead of hearing my voice or the chorus of the dead, I heard a scream. My scream cut short, as though a blade had slashed through my throat. The line went dead. Cold sweat soaked my skin. I stumbled to the bathroom, splashing water on my face. When I looked up, the mirror didn't show me. It showed me drowning beneath South Pier, lungs filling with salt water. Then it blinked, and I was back. I wasn't watching memories, I was watching replays. The ledger wasn't just recording names, it was recording loops. The next day, I tested it. I walked to Elm Street at 6:45 p.m., the site of my first death. And right on cue, the black sedan screamed around the corner. Only this time it didn't swerve, it hit me. I felt bones snap, ribs puncture, glass bury itself in my skin. My last breath rattled in my throat. Then, I woke again, 3:16 a.m. in bed, phone waiting to ring. The loop had reset. I tried everything, refusing to answer, smashing the phone, even burning the ledger. But each time, no matter what I did, the clock wound back. The calls came, the deaths replayed, and every cycle I remembered more of them. Elm Street, Oakwood Bridge, 5th and Pine, Riverside Park, Hillcrest Tunnel, St. Mary's Chapel. I had died in all of them, over and over. And every time I tried to resist, the loop bent itself to make sure I still died there. The sobbing woman's voice haunted each reset, her words now clear as bells. You are not escaping. You are rehearsing. Rehearsing for what? I think I know. The caller isn't just writing my death. He's perfecting it. Each loop is practice, every death a draft, until he finds the one that feels complete. And when he does, the ledger won't reset anymore. At 3:17 tonight, the phone will ring again. I'll answer, because I always do. And maybe this time it won't be another rehearsal. Maybe this time, the ink will dry. But here's what terrifies me most. Sometimes when I wake in the loop, I hear something faint just before the phone rings. A whisper like the echo of another life. And it says, "You've been here before, thousands of times. You just don't remember the first death." Episode 14, The Caller Revealed. The loop reset again, 3:16 a.m. My breath shallow, my heart already braced for the ring. But this time, something was different. The phone lit up before 3:17, glowing brighter than it ever had, the screen pulsing like a heartbeat. And when I answered, there was no static, no sobbing woman, no chorus of the dead. Just silence. Then, footsteps, slow, heavy, echoing as if they came from a long, hollow corridor. Finally, a voice spoke. Not mine, not hers, something deeper. A voice that felt older than language itself. "You've carried the ledger long enough, Ethan. Now you'll see the one who writes." My body froze, though the world around me seemed to dissolve. The walls of my bedroom melted into blackness. The air grew thick, heavy with dust and the faint smell of ink. When my eyes adjusted, I was standing in a vast chamber. Endless shelves towered above me, stacked with countless books identical to mine. The ledger was not unique, it was one of thousands. And at the far end of the chamber, beneath a single dangling light, sat the desk. The figure hunched over it was worse than I remembered. Its skin looked like parchment stretched too thin, veins like lines of ink crawling beneath. One skeletal hand clutched a quill carved from bone, scratching across the pages with relentless precision. The other hand cradled a phone receiver, an ancient rotary piece wired to nothing. I took a step closer, throat dry. "You're the caller." The figure lifted its head. Its face was blank. No eyes, no mouth, only smooth skin etched with faint grooves, as though words had been written there and erased. The voice came without lips moving. "I am the ledger keeper. I do not kill. I record. And what is recorded becomes real." The quill scraped and I felt it in my chest, my heart seizing, my breath shortening. I looked down and saw fresh words burning themselves into my arm. "Ethan Cross, final call." "No," I whispered. "I'm not finished." The figure tilted its head, as if amused. "You misunderstand. The ledger doesn't wait for your ending. It writes it." Desperate, I grabbed the nearest book from a shelf and tore at the pages. Ink bled like blood, dripping onto the floor. But when I looked again, the book was whole, untouched. The caller's blank face turned toward me. "Every page you rip, every loop you survive, only deepens the ink. You cannot unwrite what has already been spoken." And then I heard it. Behind me, the sobbing woman. She was closer now, her cries shaking the chamber. A pale hand reached out from the shadows, trembling, pointing at the caller. Her voice cracked through the air. "He's not the one who calls. He's only the hand. The voice comes from you." The chamber split with static, the shelves rattling, the quill snapping in half. The caller rose from the desk, its faceless head tilting toward me as though waiting for me to understand. And then I did. The calls had never come from beyond. They had always come from within. Episode 15. I became the voice. The chamber quaked around me, shelves trembling as if the weight of every death recorded was finally pressing down at once. Pages tore themselves free from books, fluttering through the air like ash, each one inked with names, dates, places. I tried to scream, but the sound died in my throat. The faceless caller loomed before me, its blank head tilted. Its broken quill lay across the desk like a snapped bone. The sobbing woman's hand still pointed at me, her eyes hollow, her body dissolving into static. And then the truth struck like lightning. If the caller was only the hand, then I was always the mouth. The figure placed the phone receiver into my palm. It was cold, heavier than it should have been, its cord vanishing into the black. My chest tightened. "You are the line," the voice said. Not from the figure, not from the woman, but from inside my skull. "The ledger lives through you." I tried to drop the phone, but it clung to my skin, fusing with me. My reflection flickered across the polished desk, warped and jagged, and then it moved, even when I didn't. Its lips curved into a smile I didn't feel. Static roared through my ears. Words formed in my mouth without permission. "Tomorrow, 3:17 a.m. That's where it ends." I wasn't speaking to myself. I was speaking to someone else. Their gasp echoed faintly through the receiver, a stranger's voice trembling with fear. Who is this?" I tried to shout. "Don't listen! Don't answer!" But the words never left me. The voice that spoke was mine, but twisted, hollow, inhuman. I had become what I feared most. The sobbing woman's image fractured, her tears falling upward into the dark. "This is how it spreads," she whispered, one voice to another, one death to the next. "The ledger never ends, it only changes hands." The chamber collapsed around me, the shelves crumbling into void. I fell through the black, clutching the receiver as if it were my own beating heart. When I hit the floor, I was back in my bedroom. 3:16 a.m. The phone on my nightstand glowed, but it wasn't ringing this time, it was waiting. I looked at it, at the cracked screen, at my own number pulsing across it. My reflection in the glass didn't blink, didn't breathe. And when 3:17 struck, I didn't need to answer. Because the voice came from me, straight out of my own mouth, slipping into the world like poison. "Tomorrow, 6:45 p.m. Elm Street. That's where it ends." I knew the voice on the other side, terrified, begging, just like I had once been. The cycle had chosen, and I was no longer the victim. I was the caller.
Epilogue, the next voice. I thought becoming the caller would end the torment. That once I spoke the words, once I carried the ledger forward, I would be free. But freedom isn't part of the design. It has been 3 nights since I made the first call. 3 nights of listening to strangers gasp as my voice delivered their ending. 3 nights of feeling the ledger tighten its grip around my throat. And the worst part? Each time I speak their fate, I feel less like myself and more like him. The faceless figure hunched over the desk, hand scratching across the page. I'm not becoming a replacement. I'm becoming the same thing. Last night, I called a man named Carter. His name was already inked in the ledger when I opened it. Fresh and glistening. Tomorrow, 5:12 a.m. Train tracks. That's where it ends. He begged me not to say more. Pleaded with me like I was human. But the words spilled out anyway. A script carved into my tongue. When the line clicked dead, I wept, not for him, but for myself. Because I understood then, the ledger doesn't predict. It commands. And tonight, the ledger revealed something new. A name I never expected to see. Claire. Her name was etched deep into the page. The ink already dried. Time and place set, Friday. Midnight. Her apartment door. My hands shook so violently the ledger nearly slipped from my grasp. She had heard the call with me. She had believed me. She was the only one who didn't abandon me completely. And now, she was next. At 3:17 a.m. The phone lit up. Caller ID, me. But when I answered, the voice wasn't mine. It was Claire's. Her breath came ragged, desperate. Ethan, please, don't let them use you. My chest hollowed. Claire? How? The line filled with static, drowning her words, until finally it twisted back into my voice again. Calm, cold, final. Friday, midnight. Her apartment door. That's where it ends. The phone went dead. I stared at the ledger, its final page bleeding ink that spelled her name over and over, each line darker than the last. I wanted to rip it out, to burn it, to carve her free. But the book only laughed in silence, its pages untouched by my desperate claws. The truth was clear now. The ledger wasn't only mine. It wasn't only his. It was everyone's. Forever. Binding caller to victim. Victim to caller. A chain without end. The sobbing woman's words came back to me, etched into my skull, one voice to another, one death to the next. I closed the ledger. Midnight was coming. And when the time came, when the phone lit up again with her name across the screen, I knew I would answer. I always did. Because that's the final cruelty of the ledger. You don't choose who dies. You only choose how long you'll fight before you become the voice that kills them.